Hello, welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection, and today we're going to talk about Black Narcissus, directed by Powell Emeric Pressburger, 1947. This film was actually recommended to me by a professor I had at William & Mary, Maximilian de Gainsford, and it was a class that I took concerning philosophy and film, and he recommended this film to me that I should go see, and it was because it was revealed fairly early on that I was interested in religion, and I was already a member of the Orthodox Church, and so I think with that he suggested I go take a look. The film itself, it looks like an Anglican order, monastic order, particularly and actually a convent, who was given this old palace in the Himalayas and in India, and they're going to turn it into a dispensary and a school for girls and so forth, and they're gonna do what they do, and this is a place that's 8,000 feet up in the air, so a lot of wind, very clear air, and the combination of that and its past as used as a kind of brothel. So yes, this is a case where you have a place that goes from a nunnery to a nunnery, and while they're working on this, some things start to happen to the convent and a few other little characters. But I think what he really wanted me to take away from it was what happens to the sisters, particularly and in particular two of them. One, Sister Claude, who was charged as the sister superior of this particular new found location, convent, monastery, convent. This location, played by Deborah Kerr, and another sister, Sister Ruth, played by I forget, Kathleen Bryan, and this is actually in seeing this film again. That's really what I feel the same way as I did when I first saw it in 2005, which was the object lesson I got from the film is that there are bad reasons to join a monastic order. And the bad reason in particular, and you see this in Sister Claude, is running away from some past pain. There's a few instances where she's doing what she's doing, and she has these occasional flashbacks where she goes back to, I presume she was originally from the north of England, but it's not, but her name sounds more Irish or Scottish, so it's kind of in that weird, so like you're not really quite sure. I would say that it's probably closer. Some of the scenery looks more like it could be up in the Highlands, but I think it's probably more northern England than anything else. But anyways, her backstory is that she was in love with this one man. I think she grew up with him for nearly all of her life, and so childhood friends and so forth. But this guy was a very ambitious, sure of himself type. Like he knew where he wanted to go. He knew what he wanted to do in life. And he wasn't entirely sure whether marriage would be part of the equation or not. Whereas for her, it was important to her, and it was important that she marry him. And so there was this long tease of a courtship, and then finally one day he gets an opportunity to go to America with his uncle, but he didn't invite her to come along, which meant that it was not going to be possible for the two of them to be married. And she took this really, really hard, and so she then decided to retreat into the monastic life, which you would think, you wouldn't have thought that Anglicans would entertain the idea of starting monastic orders. You usually think of it as Roman Catholic or Orthodox, but sure enough, you know, there can be Anglican monastic orders. Why not? And this is a bad reason to join it. To run away from some kind of pain is not the reason why you would take up vows. I mean, to the order's credit, it's voluntary, but it's renewed on a yearly basis. It's not something that you take once and then you're set for life. They wanted to emphasize, and I'm still not entirely sure if this order actually exists or not. So please pardon my ignorance as a stupid American. But to the order's credit, by having that kind of, I mean, on the one hand, you could say that by having this escape clause, it makes it easy for people just to join it once and then just leave and feel, if you're not really feeling it, or if you're just doing this all on a whim, it may be bad because it may invite that kind of thinking. But on the other hand, it does, in a sense, sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. It makes clear whether you're really committed to this for the right reasons. And if you're committed for the wrong reasons, you want to have some way of breaking off with it with little regrets. I mean, there's, as I said before, actions have consequences, and you may be looked on in a certain way, but at the same time, not all consequences are entirely negative, and likewise not entirely positive. There's always trade-offs and taking good with the bad in certain respects. So yes, this is the big come away I get from this, is the bad reasons to pursue a monastic life. And for Sister Claudette, it's this reason. But then I've also mentioned Sister Ruth, and Sister Ruth goes through a very interesting little metamorphosis, and perhaps the most memorable and striking of all of cinema, where it's established early on that she suffers various ailments, and it's not you're not entirely sure what exactly those are. She is assigned to this new location because it was thought that, you know, maybe the Himalayan air will do some good for her, and it actually makes her more crazy. And there's this gradual evolution of her, her going more and more craze, where she's like, and to complete horror show. I mean, it's been described as full-on German expressionist horror, and there's some truth to that, and not just in the look and the over-the-top acting, but it's quite dramatic when she puts on where it should be kind of obvious. She does leave the order, and she leaves it in very dramatic fashion. She all the nuns are like as pale as pale can be. It's you know, the garb is just this off-white, just paler than pale anything. And so this makes the transformation even more dramatic for her, because suddenly she puts on this dark red dress, and then when Sister Claudette confronts her, she puts on this red lipstick. Actually, the initial color is sort of more of a dark magenta, and then in another scene it's a very bright red. But just her putting on that lipstick is just like, ah, and a few other moments. So So yeah, she goes completely crazy. And it's all sexually charged. Michael Powell described this once described this as the most erotic film that he ever made, and considering this tension and this unresolved sexual tension and frustration on everybody's and everything just doesn't everything around it just makes it worse. The fact that this palace used to be a place where the general would keep all of his women, something in the mountain air. Yes, it does play into Western stereotypes about the East, and particularly India, that, oh, the East is all sexually charged and it's highly erotic and yada, 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 which, I mean, I'll get into a little bit later, but anyway, so it's because of all of this, it starts, you have this build up and build up and build up, and suddenly it explodes into this frenzy and this intensity. But it's all done very stylized. It's not, it's not too, it may be over the top, but it doesn't feel like it goes into complete parody or anything. It's just it's a very intense visual melodrama. And it works very well in that respect, and especially, and this was a film whose cinematographer was Jack Cardiff, who also would then shoot The Red Shoes. The Red Shoes came after this film for Powell-Pressburger, and it was, and it's absolutely stunning. I mean, this is one of the best Technicolor films ever made. And the other interesting aspect is the overall production design. With one or two exceptions, maybe there's three, but there are very few exceptions. This was entirely shot at Pinewood Studios. This was a combination of set design and matte paintings and all various other tricks. It was all done in a studio, but yet when you watch it, you feel like you are actually in the Himalayas. And which then gets into the whole issue of whether this is a colonialist piece or not. A really good, a much bigger project than what I'm doing is courtesy of Matthew Dessem, who started this blog project, I believe, beginning in 2008, I want to say, maybe 2007, where he was going to go through every Criterion that was put out on DVD, and it's been this. It's been a long time since he's updated it. I don't know if he's going to take it up again, but when he covered this film, he pointed out that the thing that upset him was the perceived politics of it. That this was Britain still in India, and interestingly enough, when it finally premiered in America, it was the same weekend that India and Pakistan declared their independence. So I mean, talk about the twilight of the empire, and because talking about colonialism in general is such a heated topic, and it's gotten to the point where even though it's been at least 60 years, actually 60, well, already 65 years since that particular incident. It's really I still feel that it's still very emotionally charged, and it's really hard to say with any kind of true objectivity of what actually happened. This is not saying that. This is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it was entirely excusable or that everything can be condoned. I think that the bad actions should be seen for what they are. The good actions should be seen for what they are, and let everything else fall away. But because we've gotten to the point where a lot of our words automatically carry exclusively positive or negative values. In other words, that the word itself is automatically a value judgment. Just call something colonialist is to immediately call it bad and have it be completely negative connotations. And so and that's what I mean by emotionally charged. So I don't see this as a colonialist film. I certainly don't see this as a Rule Britannia affair. If anything, it was a kind of subtle critique of that enterprise, and particularly with the notion of dealing with things that you don't know, or that maybe some things are best left alone. And this is, you know, with having this order coming in with their own values, which they're not entirely sure of anyway, as you can see, it sort of undermines their own confidence in their own faith, to come in and to try to do the right thing, and it ends up not being the right thing. So I think that it's much less a celebration of it as more taking a jab at it, and it was done in a more subtle way. British audiences loved it, so it was done in a way where it didn't get in the way of it being entertaining for its British audience, but I think it also was able to do something a little bit more, or it perhaps anticipated a lot. It anticipated something that was going to happen in the future and that needed to be addressed. So it wasn't pretending like that for Britain it was still in the peak of what it was at the time, and anticipated that this is not going to last, and this is chances are this is the reasons why it's not going to last. So, I mean, that's what I take from it, and I think, and there was also no illusions that this is supposed to be realistic in any way. This is another film where it's certainly about style, and which means often that the characters, you have characters that don't have a lot of depth. I mean, the characterization here, it's mild. It doesn't go into well, for the principal characters, it's mild. Secondary characters, it does get into caricature territory, particularly with Sabu, who plays the general's son, who's very eager to learn everything in the West, which actually leads into one of the funniest lines in the film, where he's reading off his schedule, like the classes, the things that he wants to learn, and like he wants to learn mathematics from a mathematical sister, and religion, including especially Christianity, from a spiritual sister, and then finally he concludes that, and I want to learn physics from a physical sister. So that's Sabu, and then the other caricature was played by Gene Simmons, this girl who hardly says, actually doesn't say anything, does not have a line at all. The only sound that you ever hear her emit is when she's whipped for stealing something from the convent. That's the only time you hear anything out of her. But she's supposedly this lady who should be married off, but her particular personality and the way she does things, rubs people off the wrong way, and her actions plays into the perception of that in Asia and in the East, it's highly it's highly erotic and very sexually charged and so on. So if you don't like that, and I don't like it either, I guess what I'm saying is that I understand what it is, that it's more of a melodrama, it's more about style, it's not trying to say, oh, this is what you really are, and I think because of that I don't take as great offense. I think if it was trying to blade, in other words, it doesn't to me come off like The Birth of a Nation, for instance. I mean, Birth of a Nation is very much a a film that has a particular agenda, that has a particular viewpoint, and it's just dripping with it. I don't feel like Black Narcissus is a through and through colonialist film, and if anything, it's critiquing it more than it's praising it. And even if it depends on a lot of stereotypes and a lot of other things, and there's a few other perceived problems and such with it, but I think in the end there's a lot more good in it that's still worthwhile and still worth viewing. That it doesn't really get in the way. If it didn't have those things, then it would probably be very likely forgotten and not looked on as highly. So yeah, and that's Black Narcissus. And until next time, take care.